जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोधनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यशोधनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोधनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यशोधनंदन ब्रज जन रंजना यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी Vishnupath Paramahamsa Vijayacharya Astotra Sachi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ayodhya Puri Dham Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Hari Nama Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai Nithai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, today we're reading from Madhya Leela, chapter 10. Thank you. We'll put it at the back. Verses number 24 to 41. There's so many verses, so I want to make sure I catch the right verses. So 24 to 41. Okay. So I'll recite the 24, yes? Yes, okay. I'll recite the verses and the translation. Yes. I'll recite the verses and the translation, and then we'll recite together for verse number 41, okay? What I will be doing is I'll go through the verses again, because it's very easy to get lost when there's so many verses that are to be covered, okay? So I'll start from verse number 24. Ei mata purushottama vasi yata jana prabhu ke milite sabhara utkantitha mana. Thus, all the residents of Jagannath Puri, which is also known as Purushottam, became anxious to meet Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again. Sarva lokera utkantha yabe atyanta badila Mahaprabhu dakshina haite tabiha aila. When all the residents of Jagannath Puri became extremely anxious to meet the Lord again, he returned from South India. Shuni anandita haila sabhakara mana sabhe asi sarva bhome kaila nivedhana. Hearing of the Lord's return, everyone became very happy, and they all went to Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya and spoke to him as follows. Prabhur sahita ama sabhar karaha milana tomara prasade pai prabhura charana. Please arrange our meeting with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is only by your mercy that we can attain the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Bhattacharya kahe kali kashi mishrera ghare prabhu yabhena tahana milabha sabhare. The Bhattacharya replied to the people, tomorrow the Lord will be at the house of Kashi Mishra. I shall arrange for you all to meet him. Aradina Mahaprabhu Bhattacharyara Sanghe Jagannatha Darshana Kaila Maharange. The next day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived and went with Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya with great enthusiasm to see the temple of Lord Jagannath. Mahaprasada diya tahan milela sevaka gana Mahaprabhu sabhakare kaila alingana. Can you imagine alingan being embraced? All the servants of Lord Jagannath delivered remnants of the Lord's food to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and in return, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu alingan embraced them all. Darshanakari Mahaprabhu Chalila Bahire Bhattacharya Anila Tandre Kashi Mishra Ghare. After seeing Lord Jagannath, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left the temple. The Bhattacharya then took him to the house of Kashi Mishra. Kashi Mishra Asi Padila Prabhura Charane Griha Sahita Atma Tandre Kaila Nivedane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived at his house. Kashi Mishra immediately fell down at his lotus feet and surrendered himself and all his possessions. So God comes to your home. प्रभु चतुर्भुज मूर्ति तानरे देखाइल आत्मसात करी तारे आलिंगन खाइला. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then showed Kashi Mishra his four-armed form, Chaturbhuja. Then accepting him for his service, the Lord Alingan embraced him. Tabe Mahaprabhu tahan rasila asane chaudike vasila nityanandadi bhakta gane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu next sat down at the place prepared for him, and all the devotees headed by Lord Nityananda Prabhu surrounded him. Sukhi haila dekhi Prabhu vasara samsthana yahi vasaya hai Prabhura sarva samadhana. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy to see his residential quarters, in which all his necessities were taken care of. Sarva bhauma kahe Prabhu yogya tumara vasa tumi angikara kare Kashi Mishrera Asha. Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya said, "This place is just befitting you. Please accept it. It is the hope of Kashi Mishra that you do." Prabhu kahe e deha toma sabhakara ye tumi kaha sei sammata amara. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "My body belongs to all of you. Therefore, I agree to whatever you say." Tabe sarvabhauma prabhu dakshina parshve vasi milaite lagila sabhe purushottama vasi. After this, Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, sitting at the right hand of the Lord, began to introduce all the inhabitants of Purushottam, Jagannath Puri. E sabha loka prabhu vaise nila chale utkantita hana che sabhe toma mila bhare. The Bhattacharya said, "My dear Lord, all these people who are residents of Nilachal, Jagannath Puri, have been very anxious to see you. Trishit jataka yaiche kare ha ha kara techa e sabha sabhe kari kara angikara. In your absence, all these people have been exactly like thirsty jatak birds, crying in disappointment. Kindly accept them." Okay. So please, you can recite after me now. Jagannatha sevaka e nama janardhana. Jagannatha sevaka e nama janardhana. Anavasara kare prabhur Shri Anga Sevana. Anavasare kare prabhur Shri Anga Sevana.
Jagannatha sevaka e nama janardhana. Anavasare kare prabhur Shri Anga Sevana.
Thank you, Mataji's. Khub bhalo. Madhura, khub bhalo. Anybody else? Okay. So please respond with me. Jagannatha Sevaka, servitor of Lord Jagannath. A. This. Nama, named. Janardhana, Janardhan. Anavasare, during the time of renovation. Kare, does. Prabhura, of the Lord. Shri Anga, of the transcendental body. Sevana, service. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya first introduced Janardhan, saying, "Here is Janardhan, servant of Lord Jagannath. He renders service to the Lord when it is time to renovate his transcendental body." Purport. During Anavasara, after the Snana Yatra ceremony, Lord Jagannath is absent from the temple for 15 days, so he can be renovated. This occurs annually. Janardhan, who is here being introduced to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was rendering this service at the time. The renovation of Lord Jagannath is also known as Navayovana, which indicates that the Jagannath deity is being fully restored to youth. Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadabhayyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sahabadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you for this opportunity to be leading the class today. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhi evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So these are the words of Kaviraj Goswami. So it's very important that when we read Caitanya-Caritāmṛta, there's very good focus on the verses and the translations, because this text is telling us the pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who appears extremely rarely. If you open the pages of the Vedas, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is everywhere. But when Vashishta, Atri, Gautam, Shandilya, Kashyap, Janaka, when they were opening these pages, they were unable to identify who is this golden form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is considered to be the original personality of Godhead. Okay? Namo Vedanta Vedyaya Krishnaya Paramatmane Sarva Chaitanya Rupaya Chaitanyaya Namo Namaha. The Vedas say that the original Godhead is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nabadvip Tire Jahnavi, born, appearing in the banks of the Ganga. Dvibhojo Gauraha, the form of Lord Govinda, two-armed, golden-colored. So when the rishis would read this, they would have no idea. They know about Lord Ram, about Krishna, Vamana, Narasimha, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is a very difficult concept to understand. Which is why in this chapter, in the next few verses, there will be a very beautiful quotation that supports this claim when Yudhishthir, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, with tears in his eyes, was begging Bhishma, who is a Mahajan. He was begging Bhishma, please describe to me all of the forms of Lord Krishna. And Bhishma said, how am I going to do this? I'm lying on a bed of arrows, and you're asking me to tell you about all of the forms of Krishna? I need to go. Okay, my time is up. I'm already on a bed of arrows due to your younger brother's efforts, activated and guided by that personality standing beside you with a peacock feather, because Bhishma was lying on the bed of arrows, Yudhishthira was on his right-hand side, Krishna on his left, Partha was there, all the Pandavas were there. And Bhishma said, okay, I'll recite to you the forms of 1,000 names of Lord Vishnu, of Lord Krishna. I will tell you 1,000 forms of Lord Krishna. That will be enough? Yeah, sure. I could tell you millions of names of Krishna. Because remember, Krishna appears as different animals as well. Not just humans, not just Brahmins and Kshatriyas, but he also appears as different animals too. So Yudhishthira said, okay, fine. Go dharma sarva dharmanam bhavato paramamataha kim japen muchyate jantu janma samsara bandhanat. At least, Bhishma, tell me those names. That will be enough for me to be absorbed in the form of Lord Krishna and his associates. And then Bhishma begins to recite 1,000 avatars of Lord Krishna. And in the next few verses, I don't want to spoil it for the speaker. That will probably come in maybe 4 weeks' time, I think, this weekend discussion, where in the Caitanya-Caritāmṛta, Kaviraj Goswami explains that there were 2 verses out of the 1,000 names, 1,000 forms of Krishna, which reveal Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Isn't that amazing? Huh? Bhishma revealed to Yudhishthira the form of Lord Chaitanya. Suvarna varna hemanga varangas chandanangadi sannyasa krichama shanto nishta shanti parayana. Lord Krishna, he appears in his original form, Suvarna, taking the color of Radhika, Suvarna. Hem Anga. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's body is nothing other than molten gold. Varangas Chandan Angadi. And on the body of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there is tilak everywhere. Sannyasa Krich, the only form of Krishna that takes the sannyas order. Chama Shanto. He will provide the peace formula for every living entity on planet Earth. Nishtha Shanti Parayana. And he himself will be absorbed in the process that he will establish. Isn't this beautiful? Imagine this. And Yudhishthira was listening. And all of those forms around Bhishma prayed to appear in Chaitanya Leela. And Kaviraj Goswami makes all of this accessible to us. So more than me talking about stories and things that are on my mind, and always good to be very authentic in covering the words of Caitanya-Caritāmṛta, because it's very, very rare. The benediction of Caitanya-Caritāmṛta is that in the next Dwapar Yuga, Vyasadeva would then place this in the Vedic literatures when he divides the Puranas, as it's explained in the Vishnu Puran. But until then, it's very difficult to understand this personality, and therefore I would like to go through some of the verses with you. Is that okay? So let us start off with verse number 24. Thank you. Thus, all the residents of Jagannath Puri, which is also known as Purushottam, became anxious to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, Why is Jagannath Puri called Purushottam? Because this land is actually the extension of the body of Lord Jagannath. So the deity and Jagannath Puri is the localized aspect of Purushottam Kshetra. The moment you enter into the Dham, you're actually on the body of the Lord. Which is why the custom is that you first place your head. I try to do that sometimes. It's a bit awkward that when you step out the taxi, you step out with your head first. I've tried it once and I rolled around and the taxi driver just felt I was completely nuts. But, that's one practice that people would do. And then you place your feet, having kshamasvame, having asked for forgiveness, pada sparsha kshamasvame. As I place my feet upon the body of the Lord, please forgive me. Pada sparsha kshamasvame. All of these different words are part of the Vaishnava culture, and you'll read them in Nectar of Devotion and other texts. So when you start to imbibe some of these practices, actually it helps to guide your culture. You see? And it's a very meaningful thing when you do it like this because it's regulated. So, Purushottam Kshetra, when all the residents of Jagannath Puri became extremely anxious to meet the Lord again, he returned from South India. So you may have all have read that Mahaprabhu left, and then he has now coming back to meet his associates. He's coming to reciprocate. Hearing of the Lord's return, everyone became very happy, and they all went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and spoke to him as follows. This is a very good indication of the process of Guru Parampara. That Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is being approached so that Mahaprabhu's association can be received, rather than going straight to him. So it's a very good practice that we can understand from that particular verse. Please arrange our meeting with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is only by your mercy that we can attain the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Again, not only do we go through the Guru, go through the devotees to reach the Lord, but here, clearly, it is being described that actually it is also by the mercy, by the prayers that one can access the Lord. So you see, again, we can get so much from when you read these verses that actually you have to go through the spiritual master in order to reach the Lord. And there's a lot more that is described in the next few verses. The Bhattacharya replied to the people, tomorrow the Lord will be at the house of Kashi Mishra. I shall arrange for all of you to meet him. When you read the next few verses, it reminds you of Brihat Bhagavatamrita and other texts, where the soul returning to the spiritual world is introduced by the confidential associates of the Lord, one by one. And that whole epic that happens in the spiritual world is being captured in these verses. So really try to understand how the verses are connected in here, because it gives you a very good indication on the practice in the spiritual world. Kashi Mishra, some of you may know, he was the Rajaguru of Maharaj Prataparudra. He was the Guru of Maharaj Prataparudra. And for that reason, Maharaj Prataparudra, he suggested to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that it would be best if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stays at the house of Kashi Mishra. Being a Brahmin, he's fully well versed in culture. He will know exactly how to look after and serve the Lord while he remains in his house for how many years? 18. So not only does Mahaprabhu come to his home, but he stays there for 18 years. And he was the Rajaguru, the Guru of Maharaj Prataparudra. Kashi Mishra is also of the same community of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Some of you will know that Mahaprabhu's father's name was Jagannath Mishra. Some of you may not know this, but Mishra is a very famous surname in the Brahmin community. Why Mishra? Just to explain that when the Lord manifested the Vedas on earth, these were deputed to various rishis. And these rishis then all agreed that they will look after one of the portions of the Vedas. So then various Brahminical communities were formed. And every Brahmin community is in charge of memorizing one Veda. This is clear? Okay? So even now in South India, and the whole of India in fact, you will find that those who are parts of various Brahmin communities, they're in charge of memorizing one particular Veda. And that's how the scriptures are then passed on. And also Vyasadeva covers this in the first canto of the Bhagavatam too, where he explains that after he divided or documented the Vedas, he then passed on the various Vedas to certain rishis like Sumanta, Jaimini, Yajnavalkya, etc. Paila Rishi for the Rig Veda. And sometimes what would happen is that a particular person in one of these families, they would go beyond one Veda. Someone who is a Mishra means that either they studied and learned, memorized all 4 Vedas, or more than one. So Jagannath Mishra was like that. Okay? So he went beyond his duty and became an expert in all 4 Vedas. And his son was Vishwambar Mishra, who was also known as Nimai, Gaurasundara, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Kashi Mishra, he's from the same community. So there was also a closeness between their practices, the way they serve prasad, the various prayers, the etiquette, the expectations of cleanliness, purity, the certain times of activities, preparing certain items in order to facilitate things like Sandhya Vandanam and other prayers. You read this in Chaitanya Bhagavat more elaborately. So all of these things were known to Kashi Mishra. So if Kashi Mishra was to accommodate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it would be very convenient because they're both from the same practice in their same community. So this is a very interesting point to note, how everything is arranged for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu so that his bhajan is facilitated. And this is why Maharaj Prataparudra said to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Kashi Mishra's house will be best for him to stay. The next day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived and went with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya with great enthusiasm to see the temple of Lord Jagannath. Okay. All the servants of Lord Jagannath delivered remnants of the Lord's food to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In return, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced them all. Okay, so this is something which I can't comment on. We have the practice of being in awe and reverence to the Lord, right? We don't expect to be embraced by the Supreme Godhead, the person who's in every atom, the person who knows our thoughts before we think, the person who knows our future before we act, right? Vedaham samatitani, vartamani cha Arjuna, bhutani vishyani matu vedana kaschana. I know everything, Krishna says. So yes, like yesterday's speaker was mentioning, there is independence. Of course there's independence. But beyond independence is something which we cannot conceive. And that is, despite all of us having independence, despite all of us being in control of our actions, yes, of course, they're dictated by the 3 modes based upon which mode we associate with. Nevertheless, Krishna knows what will happen in the future. It's something that is inconceivable. And that's the definition of God in Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. In Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, the definition of God isn't that you can explain something that is logical. That's why the most famous hymn of the Rigveda also appears in Sama, Yajur and Atharva. And that's the Purusha Sukta. Right? And in the Purusha Sukta, why is it considered to be such an important hymn that appears in all 4 Vedas? In fact, even the Srimad Bhagavatam has a chapter on Purusha Sukta confirmed. And it explains it. Why is Purusha Sukta so important? Because these points are explained in there. In the very first verse, Atyatishthar Dashangulam. The very first verse says this, that God is He who is beyond The measures of your 10 fingers. Atyatishta dash angulam. You think you can count. You think you can understand. You think you can study. You think you can work him out. You think you can formulate him. You can put him underneath assumptions. Keep using your fingers. Guess what? He's beyond your fingers. He is beyond numbers. He's beyond mathematics. This is a definition of God, which you will not find anywhere. Atyatishta dashangulam. And this is one of the examples. Vedaham samatitani. That I know everything. Shri Radha Kokananda Bhagwan ki jai. Shri Sri Ramakshmana ki jai. Shri Gauranitai ki jai. So Mahaprabhu embraced all of the individuals that came to meet him. After seeing Lord Jagannath, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left the temple. The Bhattacharya then took him to the house of Kashi Mishra. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived at his house, Kashi Mishra immediately fell down at his lotus feet and surrendered himself and all his possessions. This is why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Aham tvam sarapapebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. Right? Prabhupada says this quite often. How long does it take to surrender to Krishna? Prabhupada says. What have you heard Prabhupada say? A moment, immediately. Prabhupada says immediately quite often. In a moment, immediately. And this is an example of that verse. So many times one may think that it takes years and years of practice to surrender to Krishna. But the standard is very high. Okay. The benchmark is very high, which is immediately, that very moment. Aham tvam sarapapebhyo mokshayishyami ma shusha. And this is what happened here. Kashi Mishra immediately surrendered onto Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, of course, people like myself, with a lot of coverings and many, many years of conditioning, it's difficult for me to clear my mind and surrender immediately. And therefore, the practice of sadhana bhakti is there. But Kashi Mishra is not like that. It is said in the Gaura Ganodesh Dipika, Kashi Mishra previously was Kubja. Yeah. Yeah, so he was already a very close associate of Lord Krishna in a very intimate way. So Kashi Mishra recognized his Lord. And it was very easy for Kashi Mishra to surrender onto Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And as a result, what happened? Okay? He surrendered himself and all his possessions. This is the proof that Kashi Mishra is the personification of Aham Tvam Sarve Papebhyo. What did he do? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then showed Kashi Mishra his four-armed form. Yeah? And why the four-armed form? Why the four-armed form? There is a similar situation in Madhya Leela, chapter 6, verse number 202, where it is said that Lord Chaitanya bestowed his mercy to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya after explaining the Atmaram verse. Yeah, so you may remember that. After explaining the Atmaram verse, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he gave up. He gave up all his Vedanta understanding, and he realized that this person that I've been preaching to for 7 days non-stop, he actually wrote the book that I'm telling him about. Vedanta Krit, Vedavid, Eva Chaham. This person who I've been speaking to for the past 7 days actually knows the text that I'm telling him, because he's the object of that text, and he's the knower of the text, and he's the goal of the text. So can you imagine how the Bhattacharya felt? Vishwambar Prabhu, telling somebody about the book that you're trying to preach to him for 7 days. And Mahaprabhu was listening. Not a single word. Shows great humility, huh? And what happened? Bhattacharya realized that he has made a fool of himself. You know? The Brahma Sutra Padeshchaiva. Right? Krishna already speaks about Vedanta Sutra, doesn't he? In the Bhagavad Gita. He says Brahma Sutra Padeshchaiva in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's when Bhattacharya, with great confusion in his mind, decided, I'm going to give up all of my knowledge, all of my understanding, everything I'm going to give up and surrender to Mahaprabhu. Please forgive me for preaching your book to you that you wrote eternally. And then Mahaprabhu, when he is extremely merciful and when he's very, very kind, as this verse says, to show him mercy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu allowed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to see his four-armed Vishnu form. Thus he immediately assumed 4 hands. So to show his mercy, and he's doing the same thing to Kashi Mishra. So that's the result of surrendering. That Mahaprabhu immediately reciprocated by showing his four-armed form. And what's also quite important here is the word accepted. This is actually very, very important. The word kari. You see, when we have initiation, when you have any prayer, when you even engage in any ritual, the key part of that prayer, ritual, ceremony is only one thing. And if that one thing is not there, the ceremony is bogus. And that one thing is acceptance. You see? And why? Because we are strictly against Mayavad. We are strictly against Brahmavad. That's why acceptance is very, very important. So even Srila Prabhupada, when he initiated his disciples, the one thing that was important wasn't the yajna, wasn't even the beads, wasn't the name giving, wasn't anything. It was the fact that Srila Prabhupada, out of his unconditional mercy, accepted the disciple. Do you understand? This is very important. Because without acceptance, there's no relationship. Same thing I'm very sorry to say this in front of brahmacharis, but like in a marriage ceremony as well, right? The bride and groom have to accept each other. If there's no acceptance, then you can be married to anyone. You understand what I'm saying? I can be married to anyone on this planet. Even people who are not present, I can be married to. Or I can be initiated by. Yes, sure. I can become a disciple of Rupa Goswami right now. Maybe Lord Brahma. But the one thing that's missing is the acceptance. How do you reassure the acceptance? That's why the acceptance point is missing. And when it's missing, it doesn't work like that. Because that's how the parampara gets connected. The acceptance point is something that no one can ignore. Srila Prabhupada used to write in the letters that I accept so-and-so as my disciple. Or I give permission to so-and-so person to accept this person. But you see, that relationship has to be established. Otherwise, it's tinged with Mayavad and Brahmavad. That's something which we cannot ignore. That is why the Guru Parampara continues throughout ages. Because the part of acceptance is very important. When the acceptance is there, then Krishna recognizes that connection. Otherwise, it's chaos. Society becomes chaotic. You can be married to anyone. You can be the disciple of anyone. You can claim the inheritance of anyone. I mean, it's completely nonsense. That's why in the Caitanya-Caritāmṛta, you will read about the culture of acceptance. And when there's acceptance, there's accountability. When there's acceptance, there's responsibility, both on the side of the disciple and the spiritual master. I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to say in this point. Okay, so remember this point and use it when you have to. The acceptance is very, very important. Okay. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu next sat down at the place prepared for him, and all the devotees, headed by Lord Nityananda Prabhu, surrounded him. The term Prabhu is used for Lord Nityananda, and the reason for this is because the person who constructed the concept of the Panchatattva was Shri Swarup Damodar. So Swarup Damodar Goswami was the individual who put the concept of the Panchatattva together. And that is where we get the name of Nityananda Prabhu. And the word, for example, in yesterday's purport, where Prabhupada explains the use of the word Prabhupada, it's different. You may have read in Caitanya-Caritāmṛta where Prabhupada explains that in the Mayavad Sampradaya, there are 10 sannyasi names. You may remember that. Puri, for example, is one of them. So the word Prabhupada appears in that structure. That structure of the word we use the word Prabhupada is for the Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasis. Okay? So that's the difference. And obviously the word Prabhu is not less than Prabhupada, because in the context of Prabhu it means Prabhu, the person that maintains the earth. Right? So it's not normal that a human like me can be someone who's actually a Prabhu. Right? The earth is maintaining me. I'm not maintaining the earth. But out of respect, obviously, that term is used. But the word Prabhu is more accurate for Nityananda Prabhu. Because as we know, he's Shesha. And then obviously his devotees are recognized as his associates by calling them respectfully Prabhu as well. But I just wanted to mention this because the word Prabhupada is a complete separate concept. It appears in the list of names for Gaudiya Vaishnava sannyasis, in the same way that you have the Dashanami Shankara structure. Okay? This is clear as well? And it is Swarup Damodar Goswami who put the Panchatattva form together, which is why we have the verse Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Surupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. This is a verse by Swarup Damodar Goswami. So he's the one that formulated the Panchatattva. And because we are in the very strict parampara of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, therefore Bhaktisiddhanta and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they introduced the Panchatattva mantra because it's very authentic and it puts a Siddhanta in place in pursuance of the verse that we just quoted. So there's a lot of meaning and history and reason behind all the little things that we do in our practice of Krishna consciousness. There's a history behind it. It is not just random, you know. We call Advaita Acharya for just randomly, or Gadadhar Pandit randomly. We don't have time now. Every single thing has been predetermined by the previous acharyas due to a specific siddhanta. Okay, so don't please think that things are just, arbitrary. There's no arbitrariness. It's very specific. And obviously when you read the history of Caitanya-Caritāmṛta, you can then all understand and it all falls in place. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very happy to see his residential quarters in which all the necessities were taken care of. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "This place is just befitting you. Please accept it. It is the hope of Kashi Mishra that you do." And this is the word bhakti, while it's devotion. One other understanding of the word bhakti is where actually there are two individuals where they agree to have a reciprocal relationship together. So what all of us are trying to do, firstly, is in Krishna consciousness, the only form of bhakti that we follow is pure devotion. That's why every person that comes in the association of Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee. Understand this point. Okay? Because we don't follow Karma Mishra Bhakti. We don't follow any other form of bhakti. We only follow pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti. So every person that comes in Krishna consciousness is a pure devotee. And Prabhupada recognized that as well. Many, many times he said this. And then amongst pure devotees, then clearly there are different grades and different levels of advancement. But we are all following, or trying to follow, pure devotional service. And when you are in a relationship with somebody as great as Krishna, here you see how Krishna reciprocates with his devotee. Again, this is something that's a concept which you will not find in any theistic tradition. In any theistic tradition. What is the concept? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my body belongs to all of you. That is the level of love that God has when you engage with him in bhakti. God believes that his body belongs to his devoted. Isn't this beautiful? This is why in devotional service, param drishtva nivartate. At every stage, there is reciprocation. And that's what keeps us going. Because in reality, Krishna is not around us. Okay? We can't touch, feel him. But through the process of bhakti, you can feel him. You can experience him. And that is why so many devotees have been here for so many years, more than probably some of our ages, because they are in a relationship with Krishna. And Krishna believes that his body belongs to his devotees. It's a very transcendental and it's a concept which actually is very difficult to understand sometimes. Trying to understand the mind of Krishna is one of the most difficult things, which is why in the Vishnu Purana it explains that there have been 28 Dwapar Yugs. And do you know, in every Dwapar Yug, the Vyas has not been able to write about Krishna. He hasn't been able to. He divides the Puranas, he sees there's 1 billion verses, Purana Samhita. He takes that 400,000 verses, puts them across 18 Puranas. He sees the Vedas in 4 parts, he takes them out, puts them into 4 books. That's the end of it. But in this Dwapar Yug, Parashara Rishi explains that Krishna, he himself appeared as Dvaipayan. And when he appeared as Dvaipayan, he then took out 100,000 verses and wrote the Mahabharata. And the Mahabharata is only about one thing, where every person gets it wrong. What do they get wrong? They try to predict Krishna. And every time they predict Krishna, they get it wrong. Even the personification of dharma, even Yamaraj and Yudhishthir, who is considered to know everything about dharma, even they get it wrong. That's what the Mahabharata is about. The Mahabharata makes you humbled. The Mahabharata shows that you can never understand the mind of Krishna. He is beyond your prediction. He's beyond your calculation. As we said earlier, Atyatishtad Dash Angulam. He's beyond your maths. Bhishma, Yudhishthir, Arjun, Vidhur, of course, Duryodhan, they always got it wrong. They could never work out what's on Krishna's mind. Therefore, the Mahabharata is a very unique book because only Krishna could write the Mahabharata about himself. The previous Vyasas, they do not publish Mahabharata. Only Vyas, when he is Krishna, then Mahabharata becomes published. Okay? The Vishnu Puran says, because Sakshat Narayanam Swayam. Because Dvaipayana, Srila Vyasadeva, he's Narayana himself. That's why he can speak about himself in the form of the Mahabharata. And as we explained earlier, the Mahabharata is that text which reveals the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, I agree to whatever you say, because my body belongs to you. After this, Sarvamata, sitting at the right hand of the Lord, began to introduce all the inhabitants of Purushottam, Jagannath Puri. So in the same way, we read in Bhagavatamrita, the associate of God, of Krishna, starts to introduce the souls to the Lord and explains their services one by one. So this is actually a mirror to the spiritual world. It's a window to the spiritual world. You're getting to see how things happen over there. That's why Kaviraj Goswami, when he wrote this text, it is something which is beyond imagination. You know, one can't really travel to Goloka and come back to explain what's going on. Okay? It doesn't really happen like that. But Kaviraj Goswami, you know, he's made that impossible true. Therefore, these books are something which is really incredible. I don't have the word to describe how incredible they are. Maybe some of yourselves, Vishwama Prabhu, maybe you can describe later on. But how you view this text is something which is beyond even my ability to describe. It really is something which we cannot take any lightly. The Bhattacharya said, "My dear Lord, all these people are residents of Nilachal, Jagannath Puri, and I've been very anxious to meet you. In your absence, all these people have been exactly like thirsty chatak birds, crying in disappointment. Kindly accept them." The chatak bird. The chatak bird is in English known as the Jacobin cuckoo. And the word chatak, it's used many, many times in poetry. And why is that? This particular bird, it is said, it's so strong in its willpower that when it's thirsty, it will not drink water. The chatak bird will not drink any water when it's thirsty. Do you know why? Because it considers the water that has fallen onto the earth impure. Anything that touches the earth is impure. Only grace that falls from the skies is pure. So the chatak bird waits day after day and probably weeks after week, dying of thirst, because it's so determined, I will not be contaminated by taking anything from the ground. And the chatak bird will wait to when the clouds pour rain. And then it will look up with its beak and it will open its mouth and then quench its thirst. That's what the chatak bird does. And Srila Prabhupada actually explains in a walk he had in 1975 in Honolulu. Prabhupada explains, these chatak birds, they want water from the cloud, and they will never come down to take water. Similarly, devotees will simply depend on Krishna. They not accept anything from this material world. So Prabhupada explains the chatak bird. And the chatak bird is also used in poetry a lot. And there was one time where in the Caitanya-Caritāmṛta Madhya, chapter 13, verse 65, Shri Radha explains to Vishakha about her feelings, and she utilizes the example of the chatak bird. Would you like to hear that? Yeah. Radha tells Vishakha, my dear friend, please tell me, what should I do? Krishna is as attractive as a wonderful cloud, and my eyes are just like chatak birds, which are dying of thirst because they do not see such a cloud. So even Shri Radha compares herself to a chatak bird. She only wants to see Krishna, Gagan, the cloud, to quench her thirst. Okay, so these are very deep things. I can't go into it more. Okay, but this is just my very mundane attempt to explain the chatak birds. Birds have a very interesting position in our philosophy. I don't want to digress too much, but no, I'll come back to this point. Remind me about birds, okay? I'm very forgetful. Remind me about birds, okay? Would you remind me about birds? Okay, very good. The verse that we just read, Bhattacharya first introduced Janardhan, saying, here is Janardhan, servant of Lord Jagannath. You know, it's not that here is Janardhan, an ultra-high net worth rich person that owns this and that and has mansions and cars. No. that is tuch, insignificant. The greatest reputation, the greatest pride, the greatest ego is to be a servant of Krishna. That's actually the greatest thing. Sometimes we may have financial difficulties. Some of you may know that I'm a banker. You may have financial difficulties, and you may have health difficulties. But do you know what? There was a time where you were a multi-billionaire. There was a time where you had a body where there was no disease. Right? Some of you may know when the soul comes to the material world, it enters into quite high celestial forms, and you go back and forward. But the question is, despite being a multi-billionaire, you and me, despite being free of all diseases, all of us, where has it got you? Where has it got us? Right? Where has it got us? So don't worry about having a perfect disease-free body. Don't worry about trying to make loads of money, because look where it got to us. This is the birth that we are having at the moment. This is the result of someone who is materially wealthy and satisfied. This is where it gets to us. You thought about that before? When you work in a bank, you'd have all these things, and you have all these thoughts a lot. What am I doing here? Therefore, the greatest thing isn't to have material opulences, but the greatest thing is to be a servant of Krishna. And if we meet next life, then we can discuss where it got to you, where it got you, because it will definitely not be a disappointment, 100%. And he introduced Janardhan. Here is Janardhan, servant of Lord Jagannath. He renders service to the Lord when it is time to renovate his transcendental body. So some of you will know that before Rath Yatra, 108 pots of cold water are poured on Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra because of the heat of the time during the Rath Yatra. And of course, as will happen, the Lord develops a fever. And when he develops a fever, he doesn't go back to the Garbhagriha, the altar. He doesn't return there. Do you know why? Because he goes into quarantine. I'm sure you know what that means. This concept of quarantine and isolation was not invented by the NHS. For those doctors and nurses out there, we managed to protect the planet. No, it was invented by Lord Jagannath. Yeah? And every year he goes into quarantine. So these concepts are, everything's not made in China. Not even India. It's made in the Dham. Everything is made in the Dham. Okay? And we know even fighting goes on in the Dham. Right? Yeah? Anyway, that's Krishna Leela for us. So Jagannath goes into quarantine, and for those 15 days, then he enters into this phase, which is called the Anavasara Pindi. And this is what Janardhan is involved in. What does he do? There are basically 3 things that are administered to Jagannath. And these 3 things take him out of the fever. And they're so powerful and potent. These 3 things, the medicine lasts for 15, it's a 15-day course. Okay, and he has to have it on time and very specific items. We don't have time to go through all the items, but essentially, the first thing that is done is, you will not believe, but his face is covered. Face masks do not come from Jains. One Jain friend of mine said to me, you go on about every town and village, holy name. Look at my religion. Every person's wearing a face mask. That is obviously very popular in the Jain community. But actually Jagannath covers his face. And in fact, there's a whole bamboo screen put around Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra. So this practice is obviously very ancient and traditional. And what is he given? As liquid food, he is given a anasarpana, which is
sweet milk. And the second thing he's given, this is obviously to bring him energy. Then Jagannath is given Fuluri Taila, which is a herbal oil to give him warmth. So all of this is massaged onto Jagannath. And then the third thing, which actually takes Lord Jagannath out of fever, it's not one, it's not two, but how many laddus? Anyone can guess? 120. 120 laddus. Can you eat 120 laddus? 120 laddus called Dashamula Modaka. Dashamula. 10 specific herbs are mixed together. And these things are not done in just 1-2 days like the oil that we described earlier. This oil is buried in the earth 1 year before. 1 year before, the herbs are crushed, buried in the earth. And then 1 year later, they take the clay pots out of the earth and the oil is formed. And that they use on Jagannath Baldev Subhadra. There's like great preparation in this. And after eating 120 Dashamula Modakas, then he comes out of his fever. And of course, due to the Snana Yatra and being in quarantine, then the Navayovanam is performed. And Janardhan, that was his service, to renovate the form, the deity of Lord Jagannath. And that's what this verse is being described. So you can imagine how pleased Mahaprabhu must have been when he saw Janardhan and being introduced to him. So this verse tells us that we should have service of significance. This is the main point. All services are significant, but we should be very particular about having services that are recognized to be pleasing to Krishna. And that you can understand by talking to devotees, associates, and your spiritual master. And this is a very important point that's being mentioned here. Birds, that was what I asked to be reminded about. You know, at the moment, I'll finish in a few minutes, okay, if you don't mind, I'll finish in a few minutes. Some of you may know that this is a very special time for a devotee of the Lord Ram. It's a very, very special time. In fact, the last time such arrangements were made was in Treta Yuga. Since Treta Yuga, the arrangements that are being made right now in Ayodhya have never been done. And do you know who the VIP is at tomorrow's ceremony? The VIP is Hanuman. Hanumanji. It's clearly described in the scriptures, in the Ramayana, that he hasn't left the earth. Okay? So Hanumanji is the VIP tomorrow. And those that are able to recognize him will get his darshan. And these arrangements, actually for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, is very significant. Because Lord Ram, sometimes due to the focus that we have, which is right in our Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy, sometimes we may not understand that Lord Ram and Krishna, in terms of bhav, there's actually a very, very intimate relationship. Firstly, I'll just maybe say a few words. Firstly, the word Ram itself means pleasure potency. There's a habit which is also fine. These things are not wrong, to call him Maryada Purushottam. Okay? Sure, you can take it. Maryada Purushottam obviously means the ideal person. But Ram is not just the ideal person. You see? And even when people say Maryada Purushottam, then they find faults in that as well, which they don't understand. You have to read Valmiki Ramayana to understand why he is Maryada Purushottam, but actually he is much more, which is why he gave up his brother and he gave up his wife while she was pregnant, why he tested his wife. These things have to be understood because he was not only Maryada Purushottam. In Valmiki Ramayana it describes that Ram's first duty was to be a leader, not husband, not father, not son, certainly not son, but to be a leader. And when you take up the position of being a leader, leader means, in Sanskrit, someone who sacrifices himself. There's no relationship with anyone. That's what a leader is. You put everything before your personal relationships. That's what a leader is. Leader definition in Vedic culture is not like the type of leader that we believe. Leader means you give up your family and you embrace the planet. Others are your family. That's why everything that Lord Ram did was to demonstrate this, which is why the flip of that is Dhritarashtra. Imagine, just try to think about this later on. Dhritarashtra is the complete opposite of Lord Ram. Dhritarashtra was a leader that put his personal relationships before his subjects. Right? We won't go through the detail. You all know this. Lord Ram was the opposite. Right? He kept Gandhari close. Even kept Shakuni close. You know what Shakuni did? Right? He kept Duryodhan close. He kept Dusashan close. What did Ram do? Kept them all far. Kept others close. That's what a leader is. Gives up all personal comforts, reputation, every single aspect to give himself to others. And Lord Ram established that. So Lord Ram, pleasure potency. Okay? And we know what that means in terms of what Sri Radha experiences when she's united with Lord Krishna. So there's a lot of things that we can actually understand from here. But you see, there's one aspect of the way Ram is introduced in the Valmiki Ramayana that I'm going to leave you with, because I think it will make some sense to you as to why Lord Ram has a very deep relationship with the pure devotional path that Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya chalked out. And it has to do with birds. So, all of you will know that the scriptures are Parabrahma. They're also Arsha Prayog. The scriptures are Arsha Prayog. They're not touched by humans. Okay? So all the scriptures are transcendental and they're beyond human touch. Arsha Prayog. However, on earth, the first ever verse, which was called Shlok. We say all these are shlokas, yeah? Gita's full of shloks, Bhagavatam's full of shloks, right? But where these shlokas come from? Do you know that shlokas has come from, and this is something I want you to note in support of what I said earlier. Shlokas come from the separation between Sita and Ram. The same separation between Radha and Krishna. The same separation between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Krishna. And birds are used to describe this. So let's all recite the very first verse that was ever written on planet Earth. Should we do it? Ma Nishad Pratishtatvam Agama Shashvati Sama Yat Kroncha Mithunad Ekam Avadi Kama Mohitam. When Valmiki Rishi, the 10th son of Varun, when he went to the Tamasa river, he was about to perform his ablutions, and all of you know, he saw amongst the beautiful atmosphere of greenery, flowers and trees, lushness everywhere, he saw two beautiful cranes, conch birds, and they were enjoying each other's company. They were singing, they were dancing, they were touching each other, they were being very pleasurable to each other, they were talking to each other, they were having a good time, and they were experiencing their relationship together. And Valmiki Rishi, when he saw this, it reminded him of the relationship between a devotee and God, and between Krishna and his internal energy. So he was picturing all of this, how this loving relationship is actually so beautiful, where there is love amongst two individuals. And while he was engaged in this meditation, while standing in the Tamasa river, about to offer his ablutions, immediately one nishad, one hunter, shot an arrow, and that arrow struck one of the cranes, one of the conches. And while Valmiki was absorbed in meditating in a dual way, the relationship between God and his internal energy, and it manifested in the purest sense that's possible in the material world, in the relationship between these two birds. His heart shattered. Valmiki's heart shattered into millions of pieces. And he realized that what just happened is the most greatest ever sinful activity, where the soul and God depart. You see, like, it's very, very philosophical. And when he saw this, he also realized one other thing. That actually, remember we said earlier that to understand the mind of Krishna is impossible? Valmiki actually realized something which is beyond my understanding and maybe others as well, that even in this situation, in this scenario, greatness will come out. Because in this scenario, Vipralambha, is a very, very high level of philosophy. Therefore, when Valmiki saw this scenario, he cursed the hunter, and he also explained something which is of significance to our philosophy. He said, Ma nishad patishtatvam agama shashvati sama. He said, O nishad, O hunter, the activity which you have just done, it is so awful, it is so terrible, that you will gain a reputation forever in doing this activity. That reputation can be bad or it can be good, but it will be known forever. Yat kroncha mitunarekam. These two birds were enjoying each other's company, and you have ended the life of one of them, and the other one is crying in pain and separation. It's got tears, blood-like tears flowing from its eyes. Abadi kama mohitam. Because you have caused a separation, you will also perish. This scenario is none other than the entire Ramayana in one verse. The hunter is Ravan. The two Kronchas are Sita and Ram. And Valmiki Rishi, without knowing, by the grace of Lord Brahma, he spoke this verse in his great sadness, in his shoka, which is why it became called shloka. And in this verse, the whole of the Ramayana is encapsulated. That the whole Ramayana, while for people it is a great example to understand how to deal in situations and scenarios, at the same time, there is a deep relationship between Sita and Ram, where they're going to go through Viyog and Sayog, Viyog and Sayog. They're going to go through separation and being united again and again and again. So this is a concept which obviously goes way beyond my understanding, but it's very important to note that there are a lot of correlations because his name is Ram. And therefore the Goswamis explain that Ram, Narasimha and Krishna, actually they're Swayam Bhagwan. They all have the ability to manifest all of the qualities. There's a very intimate situation here. And it is remarkable that when you see the history, there was a temple built in the 2nd century BCE, and then it was replaced by another temple in 10th century. And unfortunately in 1528, it was demolished, and the deity of Lord Ram as a 5-year-old, Lalla, was also broken to pieces. 500 years later, Lord Ram is appearing again. And if you see that deity, you would never see cheeks of a deity ever. There's one great devotee of Lord Ram in India. He called his cheeks like tomatoes. This form of Lord Ram, 51 inches, made of shaligram, 60 million years old. The stone is, from which Lord Ram Lalla's deity has been made. It's of a great significance, where you'll find that the whole planet is speaking of Ram. The sows of Ram Katha have broken all records. You cannot even buy the book anymore. Everyone's trying to understand what is Pran Pratishtha. Why is some people are saying the face is covered, the face isn't covered, the eyes are covered because of Netro Millennium. Tomorrow, the Brahmins will install Agni, Varun, and Surya into the left and right eye of the deity using a stick made of tulsi and gold. And why are they going to install? Because tomorrow, Lord Ram's eyes will be opening. And when he opens his eyes, the Vandapana ceremony begins. In Vandapana, auspicious items are showed to Lord Ram so that he maintains his eyes open. That's why the Vandapana ceremony begins. And then the Yajna Kund, the Yajaman, the Purohits, and the deity are going to be wrapped with kusha grass. So there's a connection between all of these three elements. And then the Nyasohama will be performed, where certain very sacred transcendental syllables, which are secret and they're written in the scriptures, are then placed from the toe to the nails, to the eyelids, to the eyes, to the ears, to the eyebrows, to the forehead, the elbow, the wrists, the ankles, the hips, the private parts, the buttocks. Every single aspect is going to be installed with very specific energies. And that's called the Nyasohama. And then, using Durva and Kusha, in this mudra, the heart of Lord Ram will be placed, life air, and then a deity manifests himself. So the Pran Pratishtha is a very, very deep, complex ceremony, and God himself appears from there. And over the past few nights, the Agni Mantra, the sacred fire was manifested from mantra. You know this? In temples like Sri Radha Raman temple, in Jagannath Puri, the fire has to be installed days before the murti has Pran Pratishtha, and that fire is installed through the churning of the Agni Mantra, which are 2 pieces of wood, chanted with mantras from the Prabhupada explains in the Srimad Bhagavatam actually. And then the fire manifests through mantra, and that fire has been manifested, and the fire will now light all of the articles going forward for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. You know, some people are saying that the temple hasn't been fully constructed, and therefore the installation shouldn't be done, but that is not true. Do you know when Lord Ram went to Setu Bandha, he constructed the Shiva Linga? Was there a temple there? Of course not. Temple came so many years later. When Bhatta Goswami received the deity of Sri Radha Raman, was there a temple there? Of course not. As you know the story, temple came many years later. First Krishna comes sometimes, temple comes after. And over there, the temple was there for so many years. So many years the temple was there. You know, it's just that the deity is now coming again. So there's so much that can be said. But I have a team in India, and they're telling me things that is beyond understanding. I don't know if you know this, but 1.4 billion people in India have all received remnants from Ayodhya. You know that? You know, to worship at home. I mean, the logistics of this, the Yajaman, the Prime Minister, for 11 days has been fasting, sleeping on the ground, drinking only coconut water. Because these installation ceremonies are not just, you know, Hari Bol, wake up, put your tilak on and go and... No. There's tapasya involved. Fortunately, there are people on the planet who follow the ways to please Krishna. Sleeping on the ground, 11 days, waking up Brahma Muhurat, chanting one specific mantra for 1 hour, 11 minutes every day for 11 days, drinking only coconut water. And then following all of the tirthas where Lord Ram went. Rameshwaram was yesterday. And then coming to the ceremony to install the deity. You don't just wake up and do the installations. There's a lot that actually even we can understand when you have people that are very dedicated to Lord Ram and understand the fact that the name of Radha Ram was always famous. You know, in Cambodia, Thailand, Russia, Italy, Rome, everywhere, Lord Ram's name was everywhere. And it's again being installed, that Srila Prabhupada initiated. So this is an extension of the work of Srila Prabhupada actually. And my own spiritual master, Radhanath Swami, I know that he arrived yesterday to attend the ceremony, some of you may know. So ISKCON is also being represented at the ceremony. I mean, it's phenomenal. So please, everybody, do consider tomorrow to be another Diwali. Please, in your own homes and hearts, receive Lord Ram in Ayodhya. It's the Dham itself where he appeared, and so much is going to be happening. And for a country with a prime minister like that, with a deity like that being installed in Ayodhya Puri, you just watch what will happen to the nation, to the country. The advantages for male and females and the nature, animals, is all going to be improved because Lord Ram arrives and his policies start being followed. It just happens. Because Lord Ram, even to this day, is a constitutional member of India. Do you know that? He is still, every deity is a constitutional member of India. And they have rights. And he's coming back home. You know? So please celebrate Ram Lala's appearance tomorrow in your own ways. Research it, understand it, and get with it. It's very, very important that we do this. It will help us in our preaching and in the propagation of the holy name. I'm very sorry for overrunning. Please forgive me. Shri Prabhupada ki jai.